for our lunchtime speaker, Doug Chadwick, who is an author and wildlife biologist, who has written 14 books and more than 200 articles. In what has been called his career-capping book from Patagonia Press, 4/5 a Grizzly, a new perspective on nature that just might save us all, he presents an engaging series of personal essays that illustrate the amazing interconnectedness of nature, advocating that the path toward conservation begins with how we see our place in the world. If Doug were with us in person, he might be selling and signing books in the lobby. So we're sorry we can't do that today. But luckily, you in the audience will have a chance to win one of Doug's books if you participate in the chat for the symposium. We'll pick a few winners at random to receive his book. Please welcome Doug.
Thank you. And hi to all from Montana's share of the Rockies. My thanks to the Salazar Center for inviting me to speak. As a founding board member of the Vital Ground Foundation, Conservation Land Trust, it's pretty exciting for me to be here in a group talking about connectivity, conservation through connectivity. And I'm going to be talking about connectivity too. But first, I would like to show you my baby picture. Everybody says it's adorable. Is it up on the screen? Can anyone tell me?
Yes.
Okay. So, look, in terms of numbers, 99.9% of the organisms on this living planet are invisible to the unaided eye. I started off as one of them, a microbe, a fertilized egg 4/1000th of an inch in diameter. There are amoeba and even bacteria bigger than I was. But I had plans. 23,000 genes, some new, many old before life came out of the sea, built me into an adult Homo sapiens with 30 trillion human cells. In and on me now, I have at least 30 trillion additional cells. They're microbes from thousands of different species with 4 to 40 million genes among them. They're helping me digest my food, manufacturing key vitamins and other nutrients, doing part of the job of maintaining my health, producing hormones, possibly influencing my moods and actions. Meanwhile, let me advance this. Those are my other 30 trillion partners. And meanwhile, inside of each of my cells are anywhere from a few to a couple thousand of the organelles called mitochondria. They are the energy sources for my metabolism, powering my every movement, thought, and sensory perception. They are highly modified ancient bacteria that retain their own DNA and grow and divide independently of the cell that contains them. They also power virtually every cell of every protist, plant, and animal on Earth. Without all those microbes I mentioned earlier, I could not thrive. Without mitochondria, I couldn't live at all. So while I am an individual human, I am definitely not an individual life form, nor really is any organism other than bacteria and archaea. We're all compound critters, partnerships, joint enterprises, symbionts. In fact, most of us are holobionts, communities of symbiotic life forms. That's part of the connectivity within nature I want to get at here. It's everywhere you look, if you know how to look. Corals, whose reefs built much of the planet's land through time and still serve as centers of marine biodiversity, consist of a tentacled polyp, an animal, and a photosynthesizing plant, an algae, living in symbiosis, often together with photosynthesizing cyanobacteria and chitin-digesting bacteria as well. Lichens, the symbiosis between a fungus and a photosynthesizing plant, single-celled algae again, were first recognized as a combo critter in 1867. but it took decades for science to accept this mutualism as real, because the dogma of the day was that all life forms are autonomous, distinct from one another. When I see a tree, I see a plant whose roots I know stretch far underground, where they connect with the symbiotic fungi called mycorrhizae, hundreds or even thousands of miles of invisibly slender threads that extend the root's reach as much as tenfold to extract water and nutrients from the soil. In addition, this fungal webwork becomes the means for an exchange of nutrients and chemical information between plants of the same species and often between different species. This symbiosis, once thought rare, once thought a curiosity, has now been found in 90% of all land plants. And inside that tree's leaves, inside every green plant cells, are the organelles, chloroplasts, that perform the miracle of converting solar energy into food. They are ancient modified cyanobacteria, which invented photosynthesis more than 2 billion years ago and have been filling our atmosphere with oxygen ever since. For the whistling thorn acacia of East Africa, add nitrogen fixing bacteria in root nodules to the makeup of this holobiont. Then add ants. The acacia grows special inflated thorns to serve as ant condos and feeds them with special sugary nectaries growing on the leaf tips. In return, the ants defend the acacia from leaf-devouring insects. And now add bacteria colonies living in special grooves on the bottom of the ant's feet. These symbionts exude chemicals toxic to damaging fungi and bacteria, and the ants spread the compounds all across the leaf surfaces during their travels. Here's your classic East Africa savanna scene filled with the kind of big wildlife people travel from around the globe to witness. Charismatic megafauna by the ton. And here are the homes of the termite colonies that make such scenes possible by recycling plant matter, sustaining the arid grassland's richness. You're probably aware that the termites can actually digest wood and other tough plant fibers themselves. That's done by symbiotic protozoans in the insect's gut. Not as many folks are aware that the digestive enzymes actually come from bacteria living in the protozoan cell wall. Nor do most realize that East Africa's termites together outweigh all those majestic mammals thundering over the savannas. Okay, I'm hoping some of you are thinking that's interesting, or at least, well, huh? But this audience is loaded with biologists and ecologists. And maybe some are wondering, why does this guy keep telling us stuff we already know? My answer is that most of the public at large know little or nothing about the kinds of connections that truly define nature and how it works. And I believe all of us need to work harder at educating the public to change that. I can't picture how we're going to save nature so long as the prevailing views of modern cultures, our philosophies, religions, vocabulary, and everyday assumptions all reinforce a fundamental misunderstanding of nature. Most people still grow up convinced humans enjoy a level of existence separate from and superior to all the rest of the living world. They don't know that symbiosis is the rule rather than the exception in nature. If anything, they're pretty sure we are the capstone atop a pyramid of creation, or somehow occupy a human sphere was largely independent of the whole of nature, the natural sphere. We're liberated from it by our big brains and advanced technology. That's what we like to think. A sharper focus on education might not be so important if the chart of human population growth didn't look like this one on the slide I have up. Note that while Homo sapiens arose 300 to 350,000 years ago, The global population of people didn't hit 1 million until just 12,000 years ago. We reached our first billion around 1800 and developed our models for conserving nature and various protective sites when there were 2 to 3 billion of us. This is an alarmingly steep graph. It has now risen to nearly 8 billion, more than doubling, almost tripling over my lifetime. No surprise, the result is that a graph of global extinctions has very much the same shape. In just the past century, we very nearly cut the number of the grandest animals to ever inhabit Earth, blue whales, to 0. The world's population of elephants, the largest of land mammals, has fallen from 25 to 40 million to a few 100,000 giants, nearly all of them hard pressed by illegal killing and habitat loss. That's the story for species after species in this phase of the Anthropocene. If you look on the left-hand side, the simple graph there shows that globally, wherever 10 wild vertebrates lived just half a century ago, an average of 3 remain today. This is the pace of loss, and it's accelerating. On the right side of the page, the pie chart shows the recent total biomass of Earth's land mammals. The reddish portion represents our livestock. The blue is for humans, and the slender slice of green, about 4% of the pie, is for all the wild mammals that still exist. Yet we're still talking in terms of compromises, quote unquote, reasonable, practical solutions, which generally translate into even a little more for us and even a little less for wildlife. Sometimes a lot more for us and a lot less for wildlife, but not everywhere. You can see the change in distribution of big ungulates and carnivores in North America from historical times. But these large mammals remain remain concentrated in the Western Cordillera, where there is an abundance of public lands and low densities of people. This ecoregion, with the continental divide as its backbone, retains nearly all its native flora and fauna, an increasingly rare condition worldwide. Here, we still have a largely intact stronghold of nature, and the black outline encompasses the 2,000-mile-long portion addressed by the Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative, Y2Y for short. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. And it's working. Instead of wildlife being left with less and less land to live on, they're gaining more secure habitat by the year in many areas. Over the past 2 decades, the total acreage of protected core areas in Y2Y has grown significantly, as has the average that's managed to buffer and connect the cores. It's a striking success story, and I hope you can make that out visually. Protect and connect. Equally important, Y2Y's goal of sustainability embraces both wild and human communities. Here is a can-do, getting done model of large-scale landscape conservation for the world. The initiative's goal comes complete with small-scale connectivity strategies as well, like this highway crossing, a skywalk for 4-legged pedestrians in Banff National Park. Part of the impetus for the large-scale landscape conservation strategy was spurred by the question of what it would take to support viable, genetically robust populations of grizzly bears. They are an ideal umbrella species or flagship species for wildlife in this part of the world. Grizz are great generalists, able to use an array of habitats and foods from valley bottoms to the mountaintops. They are also very intelligent, curious, and capable of constantly learning over a lifetime of 30 years or more. I like these great bears a lot, and I've spent many hundreds of hours watching them. in part because they keep bringing to mind the phrase I see more and more often in scientific papers about animal behavior. The phrase is a trait formerly thought to be unique to humans. I even had the audacity to write a book in which I claimed to be 4/5 a grizzly, right on the doggone cover. But it's true that I am this much a grizz and every other Ursus, in the sense that at least 80% of the genes that build and operate us are identical. The same holds true for me and a snow leopard, and for every other one of the world's 5,400 species of mammals. Now, since more than one of every 5 of those species is a bat, that makes me 4/5 of quite a few furry beasts many folks find way less than charming. But I'm also 4/5 a hopelessly cute red panda. In the case of chimpanzees, we and they share 98% of our genes. The fact that we are practically cousins may be fairly well known, but not many know that our genes are identical to between 50 and 60% of those in fish, and to 30 to 40% of the genes in insects, such as these luminous beetles or fireflies. Yeah, I'm equally related to the likes of dung-rolling beetles. Yet think how much they do to fertilize those African plains we saw earlier. I just put this photo in because it's so cool. I have really no idea how closely I'm related to the mollusks called, and rightly so, sea angels. But I know I'm 24% kin with a wine grape, and about that much with plants from roses to bananas. For that matter, I share around 7% of my DNA with Earth's bacteria, which outnumber the stars in the known universe. Here's how we've been thinking about viruses the last year and a half, right? I hesitate to tell non-scientists that an estimated 800 million viruses drift down onto every square meter of Earth's surface every day, much less mention that about 8% of the human genome is of viral origin. The legacy of infections of our ancestors dating back to ancient fish. So if you're talking about conservation and you hear someone comment, you know, I'm really just not all that into nature myself, you are now completely entitled to respond with, that's very weird, because nature is totally into you. I'm not a fan of criticizing humans for acting like humans, or of trying to make them feel guilty or greedy or oblivious. We're a magnificently smart species, an intensely self-aware primate that is also wonderfully creative and inventive. It's not surprising that we like to view ourselves as the pinnacle of earthly life or whatever. We're certainly champions at competing for space and resources, and at complementing ourselves all along the way, of course. Yet we're not so great at recognizing that work so well for 8 or even 800 million of us isn't necessarily going to work for 8 billion of us on a finite sphere. Even as we transform and degrade the makeup of the atmosphere, the seas, and the lands that support our existence, too many people fail to see that. And I know that's not news to anyone listening. But my message is to celebrate our qualities and also to celebrate all our connections with nature. The countless ties we have with other species, large and small, don't diminish us, don't make us any less human. They make us more than just human. They and we together create our greater selves. This is the time to adapt and adopt a new golden rule for the Anthropocene. Do unto ecosystems as you would have them do unto you. Nurture, sustain health, allow to flourish now and into the future. To all of you, I would add, listen well to the representatives of indigenous cultures at this gathering. They come with a tradition not of striving to dominate nature, but of respect and reverence for nature. They have much to teach modern cultures about the equal positions held by human people, bear people, deer, mosquito, fish, and every other kind of being present all around the great circle of life. This fern you're looking at is my chance to say there's a final dimension to embracing connectivity and teaching others about it. And I wish I had more time to address it. For now, I'll just recommend looking into the rapidly swelling body of scientific research that demonstrates the benefits of contact with nature. Whether it takes the form of deep immersion in wild settings, or of sitting on a park bench in a little neighborhood green space, or looking through the window at a tree. Your heart rate slows, your blood pressure lowers, your immune system gets boosted, and your cognitive functions improve. This happens automatically because what's going on is contact with nature stimulating the parasympathetic portion of your autonomic nervous system. Doesn't matter who you are or what you think, it happens. But parasympathetic portion of autonomic, etc., that's a mouthful. But the proven result of repeated contact with nature is very simple to say. It increases human health and longevity in study after study. This is another part of the ongoing revolution in science's understanding of nature. Much of it involves sophisticated biochemistry, genetics, molecular biology. But can you think of a more simple, powerful, inclusive appeal for conserving nature than, hello, Mr. Man on the street. Hi there, Mrs. Big Time Politician. Would you by any chance be interested in being healthier and living longer? Oh, you are. Want to help? Want to help save more natural areas and start connecting more of them to each other and to us? Seems pretty simple. Seems like we don't do enough with that in our outreach and education. And what more can we offer people than health and longevity? That's what nature does for us. That message needs to get out widely. I know you are all fully capable of reading, but I'll read this anyway. Being one with nature sounds like an aspiration. It really isn't, because we already are. And that's the end of my talk. I think I'm kind of on track.
Thanks so much, Doug. That was fantastic and a great reminder of the fate we share with all life on Earth, from the ancient to the modern and from the microscopic to the charismatic megafauna. The photos were also fabulous. So thank you for taking us through lunch.
My pleasure. And my thanks to Patagonia, which published the book and put a great deal of care and thought into the photos too. So, but hey, again, I really appreciate the chance to speak with so many people doing such good work.